Hello, everyone. This is Jody Johnson. I am actually going to do a redo of our training that we did a few days ago in Microsoft Teams. It's actually on the topic of Microsoft Teams. We had some technical issues that did not allow our recording to go through. So I'm going to re-record it, and I'm going to do my part. I'm actually just going to do Heidi and Brian's parts as well. So one of the first things we talked about with Microsoft Teams was creating channels. So if I go into Teams, and on the left side of the screen, you see the different teams that I belong to. Some of those teams I have created, some of them I've actually been added into. So within a team, whenever you create a team, I'm just going to go down here and click on Create a Team, just for the sake of this particular exercise. And I'm going to create this team. It will give you a different team type. And honestly, I have not dug into it enough to know what changes happen as a result of these different ones. But for you, probably you're going to be choosing either a class or a PLC if you're wanting to create a team for maybe your department or for some other group of individuals that you're working with on a regular basis. So if I click on class here, and I'm just going to put in here PD session just as a placeholder. So once I create this team, by default, it's going to create what's called a general channel. So anytime you're communicating within a team, you're always communicating within a channel. And many people don't even realize that because it's just by default putting that general channel there for you. You're not having to do anything. But you do have the ability to create additional channels if you want to. The purpose of a channel, basically a channel is for a subgroup of people, or it could be for a subtopic for the entire group, either one. If I go up here and look at a previous channel that I've created, I created one for teaching and learning. What I could do is I could, by default it created that general channel, but I could create a channel just for the topic of Flipgrid. So for those individuals wanting to learn just about Flipgrid, that would be a channel where information could be stored. I could choose a channel just for Microsoft Teams, a channel just for Schoology. Again, these are topic-based channels so that I don't have to go just to teaching and learning and search through all of the content there. I could also develop a channel just for a subset of individuals. So this is a planning channel. You'll notice the lock there. So whenever I go to create a channel, it will give me the opportunity to lock that. That means that it is just for a certain group of people that's not necessarily all of the people involved in teaching and learning. To create a channel, you just go to the team. This is the team I just created for this exercise. Click on those three dots, and one of the options you have is to add channel. And you see pretty much what you expect there. You give that channel a name. Again, you have the option to choose whether that's a standard channel so everyone in that team has access to it, or it's a private channel. Maybe it's just a subgroup of people. I'm going to click cancel here because I don't necessarily need to add one here, but you would click add after you filled in that information. And that is how you would get these additional channels. So just keep that in mind. That might be beneficial to you if you have a class where you're trying to meet with smaller groups. And I've heard some teachers talk about how they've been very successful meeting with smaller groups of individuals instead of trying to meet with all 30. Maybe they're trying to meet with 5 or 6 at a time. So you could create a channel for those 5 or 6 students if that same group is meeting all the time. Or you could just send out different invites for different groups if you're wanting to mix and match. That might be an easier method to go for that. As you develop your channels and as you develop all of the teams, you might accumulate a lot of these. If there is a particular team that you are more likely to go to as opposed to others, you can pin those at the very top. So the way you would do that is, let's say I went to pin this PD session topic here. I could go to general and I could click pin, and that would send it up here so it's always at the top. So that might be another thing you want to do. Another option you have here is, and this one is a little bit hidden, it's maybe a little bit more hard to find, but if I wanted to get a link for this channel so I could send it out through email or post in Schoology or something like that, another option is to click the 3 dots to the right of it, and get a link to that channel. Again, I could post that in Schoology or another web page or something like that, and that would allow me to go send those people directly to this. Obviously, they'd have to be a member before they would have access, but if you're talking about providing something to your students, that shouldn't be an issue. Another option here is get email address, which is kind of unique, because if I get an email address, it's going to generate this really long, useless looking email address, not something that's going to be memorable. But I do have the option of copying it here, then going into my email, and in my email I could then paste that email address. Again, not something I want to try to remember, but I could copy and paste, and I could store that somewhere else for later if I wanted to. And then I could send an email. This is for recording purposes only. And when I send that email to that general PD session, if I go back into Teams now, and it may not be quite instantaneous here, but no, it's pretty quick. That email goes directly into that team. So something that might prove useful to some of you. Another thing I have noticed within the teams is that when I'm working within a team, I don't normally get a notification. And speaking of notifications, if you click on your avatar in the upper right and go down to settings, that is how you will find over here on the left your notifications. So there are notifications you can set. I haven't really, I've been playing with these. I haven't really found the right combination just yet, but I do know that I haven't necessarily been alerted the way I want to whenever something pops into one of these team messages. So if I personally am posting something and I want to grab someone's attention, one of the things that I do is when I'm putting something in a post, I make sure I tag them. And the way you tag them is by using the @ symbol. As soon as you put the @ symbol and then start typing someone's name, it usually, move this out of the way. Oops, sorry about that. So if I put @MER, oh, and the reason it's not finding, I was trying to find Brian Mercer. The reason it's not finding matches is because I'm currently within a team that Brian is not a member of, because I just created this just a few minutes ago. So that's why it's not finding him. Let me go up here to the DLC one, because I know he's a member of that one. So if I start typing @MERCER, it finds Brian, and then Brian, hey, what do you think about this? I can put that, and he will get a much more noticeable notification on this because I have tagged him. So a banner will pop up, or he might get an email, depending on his notification settings. It draws a lot of attention to that. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize is these posts, which a lot of times if you're trying to post something in these channels, it's fine if it's just a small text. It could be a sentence, a couple sentences, paragraph, something like that. But what a lot of people don't realize is this option down here for formatting. So if I click that, it gives me a ton of formatting options to draw more attention to my post. So here, the subject, Microsoft Teams. And I have different formatting that I can do. I can do bold, italicize, underline, strike through types things. I can have highlighting within that. I can do different paragraph styles. So I have different heading styles and just a paragraph. With these 3 dots, I can grab I can do a link, and every time I grab that, it sends me back to my picture. But I can do with these three dots, I can do links, I can do code, I can type in HTML code here. Actually, it will allow me to do other types of code as well. It will just give you an option. So there are a lot of different options here with this formatting style that I want to make sure you have access to. That's all I have for Teams. One of the other things I wanted to talk about while I was in here are calendar invites. When I click on the calendar on the left side, this is a good way to schedule team meetings. I can just go in and I can click on the block, and I can put the time in here and put required attendees. In one of the training videos I had done initially, I suggested maybe didn't even have to do that if they were in a channel. I have found it's best practice to go ahead and put their required attendees so that they get a calendar invite, something that's a little bit more noticeable to them. Because if you don't do this, you can add them to a channel. They will get the calendar invite, but they have to look for it. There's not a notification that they actually received it. So most of these are just things you would see normally in your calendar. What's nice though is when I click save on this, it generates a join link button right in the calendar event itself. So when someone gets that calendar invite, they will be able to just open it up, and they will just be able to click on the join button, and it joins right into the meeting. So they're not having to search for a different way. The join button is right in the meeting invite itself. When you are doing a calendar invite, it defaults to new meeting. There is this live event option here. I do not suggest that you try to do a live event. A live event is for something much more robust, much larger. If you were doing a town hall meeting, you would do a live event. A live event, what that does is it requires you to have someone who's producing the event, someone who is presenting at the event, and then everyone else is just a participant. So you lose some functionality that you have in the meeting, such as the just a general easy chat feature, things like that. So a live event, if you're doing something much larger, then by all means check this out. But just for meeting with a class or meeting with students or meeting with teachers, I would suggest scheduling a meeting. You may notice that I am sharing my screen. I am actually click back on this now. The way I am sharing my screen is in this toolbar that appears down here. This button right here right now, stop sharing, because I am sharing my screen. But if I were not sharing my screen, this button allows me to share my screen. So that is a very helpful feature if you're working with students and they might be having a problem or you're trying to explain a procedure. This sharing allows them to share back to you. They have just as many rights to share to you as you have to share to them. So they can either share your screen, you can share yours. If you're doing a class demonstration, you might want to share yours. There's also some opportunity to take control of screens in there, so keep that in mind. But that's something you just want to play with. A lot of people have asked how you blur your background. That happens here in the same menu bar, those three dots. Blur my background kind of brings you to the forefront. It's not perfect, but it does work. For example, in my home, there's a hallway behind me, so sometimes if I know people are going to be walking back and forth behind me, I will go ahead and blur my screen just so that they're not in the picture as I'm doing a video conference. As far as technical problems, one of the things we have noticed is some students have, and teachers, it's actually been as much of a teacher issue. Some, when prompted to allow your microphone and your camera to use Teams, or have Teams use your camera and your microphone, some people have not been allowing it initially, which causes problems when you do want that to happen. So to fix that, you go to the Apple up here in the upper left, you go to System Preferences. And in System Preferences, you have a security and privacy setting. So when you click on security and privacy, and you might notice there's a little bit of lag here. That happens when you're sharing your screen, by the way. So just be aware of that. Here in the privacy tab, I have to make sure my microphone is allowing Microsoft Teams. And I also have to make sure my camera is allowing Microsoft Teams. If these are unchecked, that would be why you are unable to use Teams with your mic or with your camera. So that is one of the biggest things that we have noticed. A few other things we've noticed is sometimes something might just not work correctly. For example, I am recording this for you today because when we were recording this session, when we were doing it live the other day for district staff, that my mic was working and then all of a sudden it stopped working. So after it stopped working, I had to actually exit Teams and jump back into it. When I did that, that stopped the recording. And that's why we didn't have that recording while I'm doing this again. So just jumping out Teams and jumping back in, that's another good reason to do that calendar invite, is because it makes it really simple to jump back into a meeting if you have to get out of it. I was able to, even though there were over 50 people in the meeting, I was able to just close Teams, go back to my calendar invite, hit join meeting, and I went right back into where everyone else was. And it took care of all the issues that I was having. So that's another troubleshooting tip. Everyone doesn't have to leave the meeting. If you're having issues, just jump out of Teams, jump back in, and hopefully that resolves it. If you have other questions, make sure you reach out to us. Otherwise, I'm going to end this recording now, and I hope it was helpful. Thank you.